For those who are still awake, sorry.
I have the same problem you have.
Good. Bless you,
I'm
brother.
just wondering if there's any record of a formal reception of a dignitary in Thessalonica. Is there anything written that ever happened?
That's a very good question. You know what? I don't think I ever recall any sort of event like that happening. First, Thessalonica wasn't as important a city as Philippi was, and there were a couple of instances of somebody going to Philippi, and apantesis was used. Again, it's questionable whether the formal dignitary view was even in view then. You know, Philippi was a place where after the wars, after the death of Julius Caesar, a number of the armies were furloughed right there, and it was turned into an imperial city. And so there were a lot of important people in Philippi. But I don't recall anything about Thessalonica. It's the same region, though, essentially.
Great. Well, yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Y'all ready for dinner?
Have you seen the let's see, J.B. Smith's comparison between 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 17 and John 14:1 through 3? How there are 8 progressions in both passages in exactly the same order.
I haven't seen that particular one.
I'll show it to you afterwards, and how it reflects. They're in exactly the same order. In other words, and therefore, John 14 would be an illustration of how 3 times in the passage of the Upper Room Discourse, he tells people he's going to give them more, which I take it to be the further revelation to the apostles. And that would be the introduction of the rapture in John 14:1 through 3, and the expansion in 1 Thessalonians 4.
I see, right, yeah.
And he showed exact, at 8 points, exact progression in both passages.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, again, the point was, for my paper, is to say, you know, that this metaphor of the visiting dignitary, which seems to have, you know, obviously a lot of play for the people that pick up on this particular term, they don't see that metaphor working for any of the other prophetic passages. In other words, they don't say the visiting dignitary view or metaphor that talks about the second coming in other, what they would call second coming passages, also reflects this visiting dignitary metaphor. It's like this is the only place where this metaphor shows up for them. And I think it really functions more in an effort to sort of to debunk the view of the pre-tribulational rapture than it is a serious attempt to try and understand what's going on in 1 Thessalonians 4. Yes?
Sir, do you have any suggestions of what the Thessalonians might have been thinking about these deceased loved ones and what exactly their status was? Or
Okay, can you give me the first part of your question? I missed that.
Could you make some suggestions of what the Thessalonians might have been thinking about the problem that their deceased loved ones had? You know, what they missed it, or they might miss it, but what exactly?
Well, as a pastor for over 20 years, and those of you that have been pastors, and most of us have had the experience of losing a loved one, I think we know what they were thinking. The pain of separation for these folks. I mean, and again, you got to remember, Paul wasn't in Thessalonica that long, and there was a sense in which some of the things that he had taught them, the implications of them hadn't had a chance to be worked out, and so people died. Believers died. And that's a genuine, serious existential problem that every home would have. I mean, there'd be a lot of people in Rome, in the Roman Empire, that although they're living under imperial Rome, couldn't care less about these, you know, higher level political or, you know, national sorts of things. I mean, these people are just getting through their daily lives. They're thinking about the things that concern what goes on with them. So to think that they would be picking up on these deep metaphors of imperial cult language and all that kind of stuff. No, they're just living their lives like we are, and they're going through the things that we are. And what were they thinking? They were heartbroken. Loved ones had died. You know, people who they thought in a pagan environment that they were living in, they, under those sort of religious conditions, might never see again. And they wanted to know. I mean, this makes much more sense to me. They wanted to know, what about these people? Are they going to miss it? You know, are we going to see them again? And I had a very good friend, a fellow named Glenn Wellborn. I thought about every time I read this passage. I know Glenn Wellborn always used to read this, and so therefore scare one another with these words. So there's the rapture passage. What are we doing? Making movies to make people scared? So, no, this is comfort, folks. This is comfort. You know, this is real life stuff. You have, I have. We have all the standard funeral texts. This is my favorite funeral text. I go here. You know, I go right here. In fact, I go here when I'm preaching an unbeliever's funeral. You can come up and ask me how I managed to do that later on, but I do. This is my hope. This is what I'm looking forward to. I was really praying for it before I got up here on this platform, so, you know. Either rapture me or give me my voice back, Lord, one or the other. But